you can get seen online very easily. You're this unique person that has a reason to be there, and here's the reason why. It's about crafting these stories. Any story that shares a little bit of your values, shows a little bit of what you're about, is what helps you get remembered. But whatever it is that you're trying to do, you need to evaluate it over a certain time period. Hello and welcome to the Big Vision Business Owners podcast. This is the place for business owners that have a message that they want to share with the world. And we'll be talking on this podcast about how to get seen online, how to raise your visibility and actually get your message out there so that you can have that impact on the world. We are all about creating a true connection with your audience, building a community around your podcast, what you do, that feeds into your business, that can lead to growth, leads, and more sales. And finally, we're all about changing the world, changing the way the world thinks by helping you to share your message so you can have that impact, leave that lasting legacy, and be part of greater change in the future. And I'm your host, Chantelle Dyson, who's here to do it with you along the way. I'll be sharing my expertise and experiences with being a big vision business owner, with being able to create content online the clever way, which means not having to spend hours on your phone. And together, we'll be looking at how we can raise your profile online to get your message seen and heard. And with that, let's get on with today's episode. Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Big Vision Business Owners. This is a brand new podcast for the business owners out there that have big, lofty dreams and goals for their business and want to make it happen. And it is for anybody that is looking to innovate, to create, to have an impact, to change the world. And you're in that zone of being an entrepreneur, building a business, and actually wanting to have possibility of doing that. And I'm Chantelle Dyson, your host. It might be the first time you've ever come across me and the Big Vision Business Owners podcast. I am a podcast expert and a visibility coach, and I teach other businesses how to raise their profile online. But this podcast is not just going to be solely about that. It will have that element in there, because how can you grow your business? How can you create your big vision without people knowing what you're doing? But secondly, it's for that group of people, and we'll be delving into other elements of what it takes to build a business and the challenges and the struggles. And I'll be calling upon some of my big vision business friends, people that I believe have a big picture for what they're doing. Every business has a why, but these people have bigger whys. They have bigger dreams and goals that far exceed possibly even their lifetime, but they see their business as something that they can, at least in their lifetime, have some impact on the world and maybe leave something behind that can continue to keep going after that. So, a little brief background about me, but this episode is going to be looking at the 5 ways to increase visibility in your business, because it doesn't matter what you're doing. If nobody knows what you're doing, then you can't have the impact in the world that you want to have. But as this is the first episode, I want to tell you just a little bit about myself so you can get to know me and decide if you want to keep listening to me. So I am Chantelle Dyson, as mentioned already. And the way that I built my first business, which was life coaching for single women, was because I had a big vision for that. I believed, following my own divorce, and I won't go into the details now because I've spent over 100 podcast episodes talking about it, amongst other things, that we shouldn't be putting pressure on anybody, but in particular women, to rush through this process of being in a relationship. And that if you find yourself in a single situation, that you shouldn't be rushing to get back into a relationship. And that was my big message. It was the thing that I wanted every person to go away thinking after they'd listened to a podcast episode. My big vision for it is still to be achieved, still getting there, but it is to essentially empower every woman to live their life exactly as they see it. And on a practical level, I see that in the sense of having the Single Girls Club hubs across the UK, if not potentially across the world. Also being able to inform workshops and curriculum in school about confidence, about relationships, communication, etc. The things that do exist in the British curriculum, but I think we could do them better. And as a background, I'm in teaching, previously was a maths teacher, I'm now in PSHE. So it all aligns very well with that. And I started that business with that cause. And I used the podcast to elevate what I was doing. I then used further content marketing strategies to take what I'd spoken about in the podcast and make it other stuff. And that is what spread the word about Chantelle the Coach and the Single Girls Club. And in that time, I've come across so many other business owners through the networking that I've done, through the trainings that I've gone through, spent time with other people. And I love this community of people, and I love the purpose-driven side of the community, the people that, yes, we need money, generating money. Any business is about money. Money's not a dirty word, but they also have a reason for wanting that income, for wanting that cash flow to be able to facilitate other things and to have a greater impact on the world, have some sort of social cause behind what they do. So when I'm doing what I do now and talking about visibility and podcasting, I'm talking about helping other people to get their message out there so that there can be that bigger ripple effect. Like, the more people that know about your message, that's great. But if I can help 10 people spread their message, then that's going to have an exponential effect. And we're going to see more and more numbers of people being helped and the world actually being changed. So there's part of my kind of big vision previously and what led me to doing the big vision now. But let's get back to you and listening to this podcast episode. But I wanted to make sure that you had the opportunity to know about me before you just sign up to listening to another 20 minutes or so of me yapping on about business ownership and getting seen online. So, as I've already mentioned, being seen online is going to make or break your business, because you could have the best product, but if you're sat at home with a piece of paper and it's all written out and nobody knows about it, nobody knows about you, there's no point in having that idea, that service, that product. It doesn't make sense. And we have this beauty of the way the world has gone with technology and social media, that you can get seen online very easily compared to 10, 50 years ago, and compare what was going on back then. I mean, 10 was the kind of start of that kind of push for digital age, but obviously we had the birth of the internet and being able to access that in the late 90s, early noughties, and the access that brought. And obviously that's only developed over time. So the entry level to this has gotten lower, but there is so many different ways to do that now. And I'm going to talk about some of the different ways that you can choose to do that, because there's going to be different ways that suit you best. There's going to be the fact that actually maybe there's not one best way. It takes a combination of everything, because you can't just expect someone to see you online and then buy your service, to choose to work with you. They might. There is a possibility that's going to happen, but this takes a lot of moving parts altogether. But the first step is if nobody knows who you are, then they can't be helped by you. You can't teach them. You can't impact their life at all. And so that comes as the first step. But where do you even start when it comes to taking that leap? Well, the first thing to do is to make sure that you know exactly who you're talking to, because you've got to be able to talk to a direct audience. Now, most of you listening hopefully already have a business, and I don't think there's any harm in re-establishing and checking in that you really do have a single, maybe two at most, ideal client avatar of somebody that you know that you're talking to when you explain this. But you're thinking of them as you create any content, as you put yourself out there and give value to the world. Who are those people? In the deepest version of it, you can name them if you want, but before you embark on trying to impact the entire world, when you're starting out or trying to get seen by more people, it helps to niche down, to focus in on what it is that you do and who it is that you help. And that comes in all kinds of forms. We can go down age, location, gender, sex, anything that really determines who you're thinking of. And I'm doing that as I talk to you now. Hopefully you're one of my ideal clients, but even if you're not, I've designed it so that this podcast, and you should never be afraid of anything you put out there. You think of someone in particular, but that doesn't mean that doesn't attract other people that are also interested in that. We've got so many different things that sit adjacent to your ideal client. So it's just thinking very particularly about that person, and essentially always thinking about them when then you're going, how do I get seen by them online. We're not just going to raise the profile of your business just for the sake of it, because you could pay for Google ads or Facebook ads tomorrow and get seen by more people. Facebook ads is very good at that. And I've heard plenty of stories where people go, oh, it got shown to loads of people, but there were no click-throughs. Well, did you segment the audience properly? Did you think about who you wanted to be in front of? Did you really hone in on that? Or were you worried because it was going to push people away? So as long as you are crystal clear on who you're serving, then you can actually start to think about the practical elements of where to find these people. So what I'm going to talk about next are the places and the ways that you can increase that visibility. However, some of them may be more or less relevant based on what you determine about that very specific ideal client. And you can test some of them out. Test the ideal client detail out as well. Like you thought it was this, but then actually once you get those clients, or go back and look, is there a segment that there's two where you've got some data and you can look back and say, oh, actually, we thought it was this, but we're actually attracting this type of person more. Or even considering, is there something in common about these people that we've observed since we've worked with them that like, oh, this is what brings these people together. This is what the common thread is between all of these people. And that way you can work out who is best aligned for consuming your content, for hearing what you've got to say, and helping you to spread that message and have that ripple effect. Now, if you're then really in tune with who it is that you're there to serve and really try to find, then we're starting to look at the different versions of what visibility looks like. Online visibility is one of the biggest things in today's age. Because of that digital progression, we have so many options for where you can look to increase your visibility. The most obvious one that many people will come up with is social media. We've got every platform under the sun that you could possibly want. And we know a lot about these different platforms. Facebook has a completely different age demographic to Snapchat, for example. We've got Instagram and Facebook are linked, so there's a benefit to kind of using them both. There's also the thought that if you're B2B, LinkedIn's going to be a stronger place to start out with than it is if you're more B2C, where something like Instagram or TikTok, the things that people use socially and on their regular day, not associated to their job, is going to infiltrate their world. And that's the beauty of social media, is that we get to enter the home lives of the people that we might like to work with, or the personal lives of the people that we might like to work with. And then this brings me on to content marketing, where what you need to provide on those platforms is content. And that content can come from specifically designing it for that market, but also it's worth thinking about bigger things and taking a step back. There's a wonderful system that we can use called repurposing, where you take one great piece of content, and this is what I apply with anyone that I work with. We create one great piece of content that provides us with countless more pieces of content for everything else. And this can start as a blog on your website, or go one further back and it starts as a podcast. Of course, I'm going to mention podcasting. And suddenly you focus all of this attention on making content that is great, and you make one really great long form piece of content and repurpose it into other pieces of content that then fulfill some of the needs of the other platforms. And when you're starting out and deciding how to increase your visibility, it can be tempting to try and cover all the platforms, when in actual fact, it's better to just focus on one, to at most focus on two, and take one great piece of content and then repurpose it onto a few other forms. Social media wise, just choose the one. Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat or Pinterest, at most Instagram and Facebook together, because they're linked. That doesn't mean you can't have the content sitting above it, the blog post or the email or the podcast that then inform the other things, but we don't want to spread ourselves too thin. We want to just get really good at a couple of things and have a process for that, and then we bring in the other platforms after that. And with all of that, with these online approaches, we're thinking about search engine optimization. That word, that phrase, SEO, has been around for a long while now, ever since we had all of the rankings, the way to get to the top on Google, etc. Most often this is associated with blogs, but because of the existence of Google, the other social media platforms are starting to try and compete. So YouTube has SEO. The way that you find videos and that you also rank on Google, now that they're connected in particular, is by using particular keywords that help get your video seen. But this now extends further in that TikTok has started to try and become a search engine, that it wants you to include particular terms. And if you've ever noticed, at the top of TikTok, there is a search bar. And if your video has managed to be categorized, the suggested term that it has categorized itself with will be at the top. And that's how you know if you've been successful in optimizing for search engine optimization, and you've managed to get some sort of attention from TikTok. And you might see that those videos perform better because they're better associated with what it is that you were talking about. And this goes for ensuring that you do this on Instagram as well, which has also started to use keywords as a way of finding what the content is. So all of these online strategies are different methods to do the same thing. They all very much work together, but they each need to be treated as their own individual thing. And each one is its own beast to be mastered because they're all slightly different. They don't all work the same. It's amazing what content you can put on one platform, then repurpose it or repost it, onto another one, and it doesn't do half as well. And you're like, okay, well, I'm making great content for that platform, but that exact same content doesn't work here. How can I come up with a way that it actually does speak to the people on this other platform? And I'm doing the very first episode here. We're going to go into these concepts in such a detail on the podcast, talking about actual examples of when this happened, what that looks like, and how to approach things like repurposing. So if you feel that I'm being a little bit high level here, I am, because I'm giving you the 5 things to think about in terms of what you need to do to increase your visibility. So the first thing is target audience, get that nailed down. And the second thing is sort out your online strategy and what route you're going to go down to increase that visibility, with some little hints and tips within that. So as much as we have online strategies, we've then got the offline strategies. So we're starting to think about how we can connect with people that doesn't require internet connection. Now, this is one that I personally overlooked at the start, except that I accidentally did do it. So the most traditional form of an offline strategy of increasing your visibility is to network, to go to networking events, whether that is business-based or industry-based, depending on where you're sitting, and to get in amongst the people that you've decided are your target audience, and to actually talk to them, find out about them, have real conversations with them where you can get an understanding of them and they can find out what it is that you do. And over time, you would then build that up by staying in contact with them personally, or in this day and age, pushing them towards your social media to stay connected and then having conversations there, building that up over time. And whilst networking has sometimes been seen as, it's everyone just in suits, just meeting up, it's very much changed. It's not something that I experienced in that version. People tell me about that version. I'm not old enough to have really experienced that version. But the version that I experienced, you still get people turn up in suits because some professions are still that way inclined. But you also get people that look like me, which are a little bit more colourful. You get people, all sorts of different people turning up to us. And some are specifically for certain groups, so the creative sectors that specifically then allows people to come together to collaborate and find other people that they can work creatively with, etc. And there's other groups that run conferences. It doesn't even just have to be traditional networking, but you're thinking about going to a conference that's on a topic that you're related to, or that you feel that people that are listening to that would be beneficial for you to also know. All of these opportunities allow you to build relationships with people, just like the online strategies do, but you're doing it in person. And in this day and age, in-person interaction is so valuable because we don't get enough of it. We come home and there is less of a desire to go out once you are at home. You might be focused on your family. The concept of the nuclear family very much is taking over. And it's all about you individually, your family, and not necessarily anybody else. So when people then take the time to go to business networking events, conferences, anything, people really value that. And that's obviously been exacerbated because of the events of 2020, of COVID, and all of the digital age. People are quite sick sometimes of Zoom and consuming all of this digital content. They actually want to meet people in person. And this is what I mean by I accidentally created this within the life coaching business, because I knew I needed community and I knew I needed to help the single girls find one another, because if you're single, the issue is that you're usually the only single one in the group. And so you feel like you're on your own. So I saw part of the solution being, well, how do I get these girls to know one another? So I started running events for single women, a single girls club. And initially this was during a lockdown period, so it had to be online. But as soon as was possible and feasible, and I remember our first event was limited to, I think, 6, because you could have 6 people from one household in one place. Was that it? Something like that. But that was what I did. And I didn't know the principles I'm sharing with you now when I was doing that. That was me creating that. And that was what continued it. That's what made people want to come along again, to connect again, because they'd met myself and I'd been able to talk to them and find out about them. They'd met other people, and there was this desire to want to keep connecting with one another, and they formed their own relationships that they built. But also I was building relationships because many of them came along to these like low ticket events and then later became clients. It's about 50-50. 50% of online trade for myself when I used to do the coaching programs. 50% came from people that I'd already met at the different single girls club events. So it goes to show that you can build that support and that know, like, and trust element through meeting people. And even if they're not people that then become your clients, when you go to these events, you don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know if they will be a potential client tomorrow or in a year's time or 3 years' time. There are people I have met that I know that I will use when I need their service. They do not need to convince me of anything. There's no selling. I just know what they do. I see the benefit, and I'm like, when I need it, which is not right now, when I need it, I will let you know. Like, that's what's going to happen. And that I'm very open about that. It's received very well because they're like, I know. They just know. And it's a genuine trust of, I'm interested in your business. I'm just not in a place where I need it right now. And it's not just people you'll use in the future for their services as well, but it's also potential people that you're going to collaborate with. If I end up talking to a load of people that have big visions, I'm going to get excited by some of them. And who knows, maybe I will run a workshop with them. Maybe I'll host a podcast with someone one day. Or maybe it's just that we'll help one another out with referrals. You don't know who people know. There are so many different ways to work together with other people that whatever reason you're doing the thing you're doing, you're probably very passionate about it. So another thing that I haven't got a business for yet, but I'd love to help change the education system, which as a general comment, I don't love when I hear it, because unless you've been in it, don't talk to me about it, because you don't know the ins and outs. And changing the education system is not as easy as even I made it out right there with that statement. That's the thing. Anyone that puts that passing comment out there doesn't realise that, like, you can't just change the system. We've got so much red tape to get through because that is governed by the government. Like, we don't fully get a choice in education exactly as to what is taught. It would take lobbying, and even then, from my knowledge of people that have lobbied for certain things to be in the curriculum, like, it's easier said than done. We're dealing with a mass scale of academies that have their own autonomy for what they do within a framework. So that's another idea for another time, and I need to flesh that out more. But if I'm in a room of educators, then I'm going to find people interesting based on what they say, what they're thinking, and how they're doing things. Then move over to the business side, and anyone that's got passion for what they're doing, it's great. And then when I was supporting single women, even though I'm now not single myself, I still have that appreciation for what it's like to be single, to feel that pressure, and to totally understand what they're going through, even, as times change. Bridget Jones has not gone out of date. It's slightly dated if you watch the film back, but it's not different to how it was then. This principle still exists, so we haven't changed enough with that yet, though hopefully people feel more liberated to go out there. So you just can have these great conversations with people, and I can adapt, and you can adapt to any situation based on the topics of interest that you have and where your business sits within those things. And having these conversations that light up thoughts, that show people what you're doing, what you are doing it for, why you're there, and why you wake up each and every day. That's the bit that's going to get people to like you and to let people know about you. And if you've really nailed down what you're doing to something very, very definitive and niche, people are going to remember it, because you're like, I did not know that was a thing. Like, of course we need that. Of course. That's something that must happen, but I've never thought about it before. So you'd be amazed what you can get from connecting with these other people and just learning more about others. Now, when it comes to any interaction with people, you need to think about what you're saying to them. And this doesn't mean that you need to sit on like worry about it. But as I just mentioned then, this is number 4, in that you remember the things that stick out. Because at these meetings, for example, if you go networking, what quite happens is that you're asked what you do. And it's a very quick exchange of what you do. And most people at that point make some sort of decision as to whether that's something they need or want. When it comes to socializing in a more casual way, such as when I was helping women help one another, often conversation would be centered around what their job was, what that you do. Same question, different context. But that just kind of goes under the radar. It's not that memorable unless you have a very memorable job or role to share. And it comes down to, after initiating and getting through a little bit of small talk to break the ice, content on all forms, whether that's online or in person, comes down to making great content, which at this point in time is about storytelling. It is about painting a picture of what it is that you do and stand for, or the things that have happened in your past. I made it a priority that I told you a little bit about what I've done before. And throughout this podcast episode, I've told you some little bits about previous businesses and ideas I've got, these thoughts. It doesn't have to be a story from start to end. It doesn't have to have a moral section to it, but just something that means that this is not just the same old business podcast that you would have listened to or could have listened to from absolutely anybody else. You're listening because I've got something interesting to add. I've got my own experience, my own thoughts to share. And when you're connecting with someone, human to human, you need to show them who you are. That means that you're not just another one of whoever you are and the category you fit into. You're not just another coach. You're not just another social media manager. You're not just another educator, trainer, etc. You're this unique person that has a reason to be there, and here's the reason why. Here's what led me to that point. And sharing even just light versions of those stories can let people connect with you or let people understand you. Some people will have that resonance with you because they'll have gone through the same thing. They feel that they're in a similar position or were in a similar position or are behind and want to be in the position you are. Other people will go, I'd never really thought of that, seen it that way, or experienced that myself, but I totally get how that can be difficult or how that can be confusing. And so it's about crafting these stories. And this helps then when you then elevate to find yourself other ways to gain visibility online, such as going and doing talks, speaking on panels. Podcasting sits alongside that because you're talking. It's almost like doing a talk every week, and it helps you refine some of those stories. But when it comes to talking about it, I have spoken about the same things over and over and over again because there's a different audience in the room. There's a different person listening this time. Person that was single 2 years ago is not single now, but someone that is single now was not 2 years ago. And so worse, they can scroll back through the old podcast episodes of The Single Girl's Guide to Life, but they might not want to. There's 100. Like, you got to scroll. They want the latest thing. They want the latest news, potentially. So repeating stories is not a bad thing if you're good at it, which I'm not all that good at. Funny stories obviously help make you a bit memorable, but any story that shares a little bit of your values, shows a little bit of what you're about, is what helps you get remembered. It's very easy to teach. I bet when you think about your teachers at school, if you think back to a lesson or something about them as people, you don't remember any of the individual lessons except for when there's a story. Whether it's a story of what happened in the classroom or it's a story that was told to you by that teacher, where they told you something fascinating about their life or something interesting about their subject, which was probably completely unrelated to anything that they were required to teach you, but it made that instance memorable. And that's what we're trying to do with visibility. We're trying to stand out. We're trying to get seen. We're trying to be memorable and have people know us. You can put any old content out there, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get seen. It doesn't mean you're going to get remembered, because you might just sound like everybody else. And we've got to come up with a way that it's uniquely yours, of a way to tell your story and get people on board with what it is that you do, to want to be part of it, to want to learn from you and continue forward on with that. And lastly, we come to increasing your visibility. I mean, I didn't mention absolutely every single way that you can increase visibility. I dropped in there about being on panels, you can do PR, you can write articles and guest blog on other people's posts. Again, we don't have time because I could talk for hours on this, and that's the whole point of making a podcast. But I'll go into some of those practical details in more sense. What you do need to do, though, is the kind of fifth principle for increasing visibility online, as well as the online and offline strategies, is to really pay attention to the analytics and the progress that you make in this area. Because you don't want to be doing all this visibility work to see no trade-off. However, some of the methods used and that I've mentioned are slow burners. In fact, quite a lot of them are. Because I dropped in about Facebook ads and Google ads. And if you've got the budget, those things can be really good if you've got your systems and processes ready and you're just trying to get in front of more people in that sense. Advertising, it's it's almost like the traditional sense to some degree, but you can go drop leaflets if you want. You can put an ad in a newspaper. I'm not going to go through the 20 practical steps to increase your visibility, but whatever it is that you're trying to do, you need to evaluate it over a certain time period. An ad going in a newspaper or out on Facebook is time sensitive because you're only going to run that ad for a particular amount of time. When you post a podcast, when you build content and put it out there, that takes time. You can't measure it in a week or a month. You can look at downloads initially, you can look at engagement initially, but there's patterns in what you do there, and that's a long game. When you meet people in person, some people aren't ready to buy. There's plenty of people I've met that I want to buy from, but I'm not ready to because it's not actually what I need right now. There's still things that I need to do first as a priority compared to what they've got to offer. It's going to be useful to me. I absolutely want it, but I don't need it right now. So whatever it is that you're doing, make sure that you decide on a key stat for it, to look at what it is that you want to achieve through that and to monitor it, to check its effectiveness, to make sure that it works for you and your business. And based on what you find, change up what you're doing. If a particular piece of content does well, then think about, was it just that one-off topic? Did we do really well on titling it? Did we do well on the description? And did we SEO? Was that strong? Did we say something at the start that got people's attention? Did we react to news? Was it the topic? And you decide. I can tell you now, the Single Girl's Guide to Life, every time I did a topic on dating, it peaked on the downloads. I didn't have a dating product at the time, so that was not useful to me. But going forwards, if I'm going to try and market a dating product, I'm probably best to associate it with the dating podcast episodes. And also, I should probably look to try and push that more on social media, the little clips from it, because that episode got people's attention just through its title and topic. So if I put that episode in front of more people, leveraging the exposure via more social media platforms, what do I think that's going to do in the whole scheme of things? Bring more people in to listen, push people towards lead magnets, and bring more people into my world and help spread that message even further. That's part of what we're trying to do there. But you've got to look for patterns and you've got to be prepared to change. Starting this podcast takes me back to when I started the first podcast. And I don't know if this is going to be right. You're here with me on this journey. If you're listening and you're one of the first, the date is the 12th of October, 2023. And I know you shouldn't normally put things like that in podcast episodes, but I want you to know that I don't know if what I'm doing right now is right. I've come up with the strategy based on what I know, based on what I hope works. And this is where we're at. You don't know till you've tried it. And I have to follow the data. I have to be prepared that I'm going to get like 4 downloads in the first week. I don't have a following. I don't have anything to push this on. I've got what I've got here. I've got all that I know. And I will use everything, or many of the things that I've mentioned today, as a way to increase my visibility online. And it's worth remembering that this is all an experiment. Just because you don't hit that target doesn't mean that you're a failure. It just means that didn't work the way you thought it did. So let's pivot and let's try something different. Let's adapt. Maybe this topic doesn't work. Maybe this audience isn't quite right. Maybe I'm putting myself in the wrong places. What else can I do differently to see if we can increase some of the goals and targets, actually hitting them, and go from there? But be prepared to move around and adapt, because it's not fixed. It's a piece of content, or it's an event you went to, or it's a social media platform you're using. I started on Instagram, moved to TikTok predominantly. Now I'm back to Instagram because there's pros and cons to them. Bit of both. Don't really do Facebook. Have dabbled in Pinterest. All of these things. And you go, oh, but isn't it a waste of time? Well, it might be a waste of time, or it might be the best thing you ever do. But those little feedback loops, that quickly testing it out, seeing if it works, seeing what happens, and then going with it, is the way to find the visibility format that works for you whilst adapting and putting in place all those different things that I've mentioned in this episode. Now, if you have managed to get this far, this is the very first episode of the Big Vision Business Owners podcast. And that means that there are few listeners. And the only way that business grows is through word of mouth. And I'm not going to be someone that doesn't ask you to do that, because I know that when I listen to something that I really enjoy, or a brand that I just get on with, I talk about this all the time, brand loyalty, I want to see them succeed. So if you love this episode or any future episode, it would be really great if you could do something that helps me grow it. If you've taken anything away from this episode, if you've really valued something, then I would absolutely love for you to subscribe if that's what you prefer, follow depending on what platform you're on, or if you want a little bit more of an intimate relationship, a little bit of more closeness as business owners, then head to the.clever.content.creator, dots in between the words, on Instagram, and we can have a chat there in the DMs, get to know one another, see what you're doing. You can tell me all about your big vision. I'll tell you about my big vision and where I'm at with business, and you can follow for more content there. But one of those two things would be super appreciated at this point in time. Something I didn't do probably in my first episode, or probably just said follow and like, as is standard in these kind of podcasts. But it'd be fantastic to get to know more of you. If you're a big vision business owner, I want to connect with big vision business owners. I want to allow people to get to know one another, to connect together, and to find this system of everybody working together. It's been a pleasure to start this very first podcast, to get things going, and to help you to increase your visibility. We will be delving into more topics in more detail in future episodes, so make sure you keep up to date. Drop me a follow in one of those places, and I will see you there.